Hi, my name is Connor Riley, and on this week's Connor in Coverage, we're going to start off with winners and losers from the Oregon game. A game that was so lopsided that even Team Iceland thought that what Georgia did to the Ducks on Saturday was pretty cruel. The first winner for this week is Ladd McConkey. When opposing defenses play Georgia this year, they're going to have to make some difficult decisions. Whether it be covering Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, Kenny McIntosh, or Darnell Washington, they're going to have to make some decisions in terms of doubling some players and potentially leaving others open. But among the starting pass catchers for Georgia this year, teams shouldn't forget about Ladd McConkey, because it kind of seemed like Oregon did on Saturday. McConkey finished the game with 5 catches for 73 yards. He also added a rushing touchdown that we're going to touch on a little bit later on tonight's program. McConkey was constantly finding open space and making the most of his opportunities. In fact, it seems like on one particular play, Oregon completely forgot or ignored him. And Stetson Bennett kind of did too for a second there. Here Bennett walked through what happened on his incredible touchdown pass to end the first half when McConkey was wide open. So open that the closest player in proximity to McConkey on the touchdown was actually his own teammate, Darnell Washington.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't smart. I need to not do that, first and goal from the 1. But I knew that we had motioned Ladd over there, and obviously we had never hit him, but I knew, started scrambling, and I was trying to find him because I knew he was over there somewhere, and then found him and threw it. But, it probably wasn't smart. I needed either ground it at him or run it or throw it to Brock or something front side, especially first down and 1. Don't do that, but it did work out.
McConkey is far from some novelty or some knockoff New England Patriots receiver. By now, we've all heard the same terrible New England Patriots Bill Belichick future draft pick jokes. Ladd McConkey is going to be a very important part of this Georgia offense this year, and Saturday absolutely showed why teams need to know where he is on the field at all times. Our first loser, it's Dan Lanning. Now, I still think Dan Lanning is going to be a very successful coach. He's going to have Oregon among one of the best teams in the Pac-12 and probably in the country sooner rather than later. But it's hard to envision his debut going any worse than it did on Saturday. Oregon got blown out 49-3, shot out of the sky in his first game as a head coach. Offensively, Bo Nix looked like Bo Nix usually did when he plays Georgia, throwing 2 costly interceptions when Oregon had the ball on Georgia's side of the field. But it's defensively that might be even more concerning for Dan Lanning and what happened on Saturday. Oregon had talented players on that side of the ball, such as Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Christian Gonzalez, and yet none of it seemed to matter, especially considering Lanning's background as a defensive mastermind at Georgia these past couple of years as the defensive coordinator for the program. Georgia scored a touchdown on his first 7 drives of the game, not punting until the 4th quarter and when Georgia was already up 49-3 at that point. We do think that eventually Lanning is going to get Oregon in a place where it is competitive and winning a lot of games, potentially even this season. But Saturday also showed, as Kirby Smart told us afterwards in the post-game press conference, it's a lot harder to win in college football when you don't have the most talented players.
I got a lot of respect for Dan. Some of those players around that field, Dan Lanning recruited. And Dan Lanning did a tremendous job for the University of Georgia while he worked for the University of Georgia, and now he's working for Oregon. He's going to do a really good job at Oregon. He's relentless. And they'll bounce back from this, and he knows that we got better players. And he'll never say it, but he knows we got better players, and I respect how he works.
Our next winners are the Georgia tight ends, specifically Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington. Now, they only finished the game with 4 catches for 71 yards, and they're going to have more statistically productive days going forward for Georgia. But in actually getting to watch them play on Saturday, you see why they were able to tilt the field so greatly for Georgia's benefit and open things up for everyone else around them. We mentioned Ladd McConkey's rushing touchdown earlier, which got things started for Georgia in the scoring on Saturday. Pay attention to what Bowers does on this play as he does his best Michael Orr impression and drives an Oregon defender into the bus. And it's worth pointing out here that Bowers is the smallest of Georgia's tight ends. And then let's also not forget about the Goliath that is Darnell Washington. He showed that while, yes, he's also an incredible blocker, he's pretty nifty when he gets the ball in his hands as well. He had one play where he dragged one Oregon defender and then hurdled another as he finished the game with 33 receiving yards and one incredible 25-yard reception there. Now, yes, Georgia does have great depth with Oscar Delp and Eric Gilbert, but it's pretty telling that Bowers and Washington were the only 2 tight ends to play in the first half on Saturday. And a big reason why is because of what they bring as blockers to this offense. And When you go back and watch the Oregon game, you can see they're just as devastating putting their hands on somebody else as they are when the ball gets in them from a Stetson Bennett pass. Our next loser is negative recruiting. Kirby Smart knows opposing coaches are talking junk about Georgia right now on the recruiting trail, specifically when it comes to their skill players. Georgia hasn't had a running back top 1,000 yards since 2019. It has just one 1,000-yard receiver in program history, and so that negative recruiting does seem to be impacting Georgia on the recruiting trail when it comes to running back and wide receivers in this 2023 recruiting cycle. Georgia doesn't have a running back commitment at this time. Georgia hasn't signed a top 200 overall prospect at the wide receiver position since the 2020 recruiting cycle. So, Kirby Smart used Saturday to send a message to opposing teams this year, not just on the college football field, but on the recruiting trail as well. Georgia's going to score a lot of points this year. They're going to have a lot of guys involved on the offensive side of the ball, with a number of them making big-time plays. Doesn't matter if you're a wide receiver like McConkey or a tight end like Washington. If you're good enough to play at Georgia, you're going to make an impact on this team this year. And Georgia's going to have a lot of fun doing it, scoring tons and tons of points.
We want people that want to come play in this offense. And I think when you watch what they did today, if you're watching from home, you're saying, man, I'd love to play in that offense. They throw the ball around, they toss it around 30 for 37 for how many yards? I don't know. He threw the ball really well. So passes, he threw a lot of passes for a lot of yards. And I think that's a credit to the offensive staff for the planning they had.
Georgia had 7 different receivers record a reception of 20 yards or more. 5 different players had a rushing touchdown. Saturday wasn't so much a threat, but a promise to the rest of college football. This Georgia offense is going to lead this team this year, and it might just be the best offense in the country if we saw what they did on Saturday against a talented Oregon team translate across the rest of this college football season. And that should be very enticing to just about anybody out there that will want to play a fun brand of offensive football.
And if they're willing to give you a chance to make those plays and throw the ball around, I mean, we think Stetson does it well. We think we got good skill players. Scoring points is the name of the game.
Our last winner is Chris Smith. Everyone is talking about the Malachi Starks interception, naturally so. You saw the reason why Starks was a 5-star talent and why he's going to be an important player even as a freshman for this Georgia team this year. But don't lose sight of what Smith did once again as he came down with another interception in another big-time game for Georgia. It looked eerily similar to what he did last year to DJ Uiagalelei in the opener against Clemson, only this time it happened to be Nix that he tricked into throwing the ball his way. Here's Smith talking about the play, the similarities to the Clemson interception last year, and why he was able to successfully bait Nix into throwing him the football.
It's kind of the same the way I jumped down, but it's a different kind of play formation and stuff like that. I just recognized the formation, and they was kind of running screens off it to begin with, and just studying the coordinator and things like that. I knew that it was a screen to go was possible to come off of it, and I just read the play, broke on the ball, and made a good play for sure.
Smith also added a tackle for loss and a massive pass breakup later on in the game. The hit he delivered on the Oregon receiver was so devastating that Smith himself got a stinger. That's just the price of being a Warrior, I suppose. Georgia lost Lewis Cine to the first round of the NFL draft from last year, and a lot of people naturally think that Starks is going to be the guy that replaces him. The athleticism is there, and ultimately Starks is going to grow into being a very good player for this Georgia team, perhaps even sooner rather than later. But Smith is already for that for this Georgia team. He's going to make plays all over the field, much like he did against Oregon on Saturday. And while many expect Starks to be a first-round safety, Smith is a guy very capable of delivering those same type of results for the Georgia team this season. There's a reason he was a captain on Saturday, and he backed it up as big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games. Our next segment here on Connor and Coverage is sort of an interview medley of sorts. There was so much said after the 49-3 win over Oregon on Saturday, we can't cover it all on the pages of DogNation.com. So I've sort of cobbled the things together, and we've got a bunch of different clips here to hear from Kirby Smart, Kenny McIntosh, Chris Smith, Dan Jackson, and of course quarterback Stetson Bennett. You hear some of the insights they had after the game, as well as some memorable quotes that they made following the win over Oregon. And then coming out of that, we're going to do a Q&A live on the Dog Nation social channels, discussing the Oregon game, the rest of the SEC this weekend, and pretty much anything you guys want to talk about. Thanks for tuning in to Connor and Coverage. So without further ado, here's the interview medley with Kirby Smart, Stetson Bennett, Chris Smith, Dan Jackson, and Kenny McIntosh talking about the 49-3 win over Oregon.
Suggesting that Stetson no longer has a flip phone?
I don't think he does now. I think somebody said he did, and I don't know. I haven't checked.
And Georgia's one of the only teams that didn't really go out and get a lot of transfers in the SEC. Was that a strategy by you coming into this season for one reason or another?
No, people always ask that question. I'm not anti. I think it's awesome to get a transfer that can help your team somewhere, right? And we lost out on some guys that we wanted to get. And once we lost out on the players that we thought improved our team, we weren't going to take a transfer so that I wouldn't have to answer a question about not taking a transfer. So we didn't want to just do it. We wanted to upgrade our roster. And if you don't feel like somebody upgrades your roster, then don't do it. And you're always exchanging a transfer for a high school kid that you could bring in here and develop. And that's a lot of college coaches' fear right now. They don't want to bring a high school kid in because they're worried they're going to leave. So you better do a good job of farming your own place and make sure they understand that it's not easy here. It's hard. But if you buy into hard, you'll be like those 10 other football players in there that are playing the National Football League right now that are shaking their hands. And they love it. So that's what we're trying to sell is come hang out with Trayvon, Jordan, Nakobe, George Pickens, and all those guys. And you'll be like them one day if you work. And the kids that we attract are usually the ones that want to stick around and do that.
Yeah, Stetson, just from a start to finish standpoint, do you feel, where does that game rank for you personally as far as, is it games that you've quarterbacked? Is that one of maybe the best one?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably the best one I played. Yeah.
And why is that?
I'd say probably the off season. All the work, putting it in with these guys. Year 3 in the offense. Again, having time and having the playmakers outside. So I think a combination of a lot of things.
Malachi Starks makes that first interception. How big do you think that is for him to make that kind of a play in his first career college game?
Yeah, on the hit, I just got a little stinger on my shoulder. I'll be all right, ain't nothing major. And Malachi Starks, like I've been talking about him all fall camp, man. He's a great player, man. And I've seen him do that a bunch of times. So, definitely one of the greatest interceptions I've ever seen, man. I mean, he laid out for that one. And I was just so excited. I couldn't believe he made the play. But, I think it's big for him, man. I think I'm going to continue to see great things out of him because he's coming this season.
Any question on the far right?
Question for either of you. You guys obviously kept them out of the end zone tonight. Obviously, that 4th down stop at the end of the game, it seemed like this team, just like last year, had that same mindset of we were going to try and keep guys out of the end zone. How do you keep that same mindset after even losing so many of these key players from last season?
Dan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we were actually just talking about it outside. That was one of the biggest moments in the game for our defense. We had some younger guys in, but they stood up and did what we needed to do. And no score right there was huge.
Yeah, one of our mottos is no one in our end zone, and we definitely pride ourselves on that. Even up to all zeros hit on the clock, 2s and 3s were able to get in and get some good experience. But like you said, we wanted to hold the standard, and they did a great job of that, being bit on break.
Just getting back to that non-complacency and all that Kirby preaches. How does he sell that to y'all, and how do y'all buy into it?
He says it just like that. Like, we can't have any complacency. And in the social media age today, you see a lot of things that people say about us, and they say we lost so many guys. We don't have anybody back there, and we hear those things. We definitely want to go out there and show what we can do. Like Coach Smart said, we want to do the hunting. We never want to be hunted. And I just appreciate him for that mentality that he has, because it rubs off on us tremendously, man. We take on the mentality of him, and we want to go out there and make him and the rest of our coaches proud, as well as each other. So.
Okay. You've been here a long time. You've made big plays, but you've never been the man like you were today. How did that feel?
I just thank God for giving me the opportunity to be in this position to be able to make those plays. Like you said, I've been waiting a long time, and I kind of seen how it's supposed to look, how it's supposed to. I think I had great examples. Like you said, I think this is RBU. This is RBU. You know what I'm saying? So all the great running backs in front of me, watching them be able to, like DeAndre Swift, to be able to watch them go out there and just compete at a high level each and every single week. So for my time to be here, I just, wanted to look kind of the same, you know what I'm saying? This is a standard here at Georgia, and I just want to, uphold the standard for the next guy.
Stetson, how did it feel to just start your season opener for the first time for the Bulldogs when you're national champion and it took you this long to do it? And also, how are you so good at blocking out that noise besides having the phone? Did it help this offseason knowing that you were going to be the starting quarterback the whole entire season to kind of have that extra confidence coming in this year?
Yeah, How did it feel starting the first after that? It felt good, didn't it? It felt good. Yeah, I mean, it's always good to go and to be the guy. And the reps, like I've said, throwing with the guys in the offseason, working on choice routes, mechanic, like just the little things that show up when you don't know when they're going to show up, but that's why you work, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool, but on to the next now, I guess.
All right, Kirby, Stetson career high passing yards today. Obviously, told he's the starter off season. Is there anything to that, or is it just he went out there and played within himself?
I mean, yeah, there's something to him being the starting quarterback the whole time, right? Like if we had rotated ones and twos and you guys had debated who the starter was, would he have played this well today? I don't know. I don't think Stetson really gets affected by anything I do, you do, or anybody does. Stetson lives in his own world, and he does a really good job of blocking out all the noise. The guy had a flip phone, in 2021. So he doesn't really get into all that. And I think that's what his kind of edge is. All right, and he made some plays that he didn't make the right decisions on today. And he knows those. He knows his mistakes. He's got to be smart. He does things that maybe we don't ask him to do, but he did make some plays with his feet. And I think you take the good, and I'm not going to call it bad, but you take the good with his poor decisions.
Kirby, I know, especially after one game, you're going to want to keep expectations in check, but things are going to...
Expectations are definitely already in check. You don't have to worry about that.
I was going to say externally they're going to be astronomical. So is there anything you can say now after that one game in terms of how good this team could be or what the ceiling could be?
Externally, we don't listen to. That's the key word you just said. Externally, there's expectations every year. We embrace expectations. We hunt. We go do the best job we can, and if it falls short, it falls short. But I don't look at it from the expectation standpoint. I look at it like, what can we do better? How do we improve? How do we get more players playing winning football? Because everybody in this room knows we're going to lose somebody. Somebody's going to be injured throughout the year, and how do we get them better? But the expectations I have is for our guys to play at their best and our coaches to prepare at their best, and I think that our guys really did that this game.
There we go. That should be fixed now. Florida State LSU have just kicked off. Welcome in everyone watching. My name is Connor Rice, Connor in coverage. We're about 10, 12 minutes here answering your questions on Georgia, Oregon, what things look like ahead for Georgia as season gets underway. 1-0, 49-3, absolute destruction of the Ducks. I'm pretty sure you need a hunting license to do what Georgia did to Oregon on Saturday there, and we'll answer some questions here, what we saw, what we liked, what we think needs to get better, though, quite frankly, not a whole lot out there after that first game and that first performance. I think even on the defensive side of the ball, I know I'd answered some questions earlier in our chat here tonight on what Georgia did defensively and how I thought they looked there. I think a lot of it was dictated by what Oregon tried to do offensively. It was very similar to what Kentucky had done last season in terms of getting the ball out quickly, trying to find space, quick, short plays. And I think the problem that now both Oregon and Kentucky have run into is that running that type of offense, while yes, you can get yardage and sort of keep that offense off the field for Georgia, which I think is going to be something teams try and do going forward now, it requires a lot of things to go right for you to ultimately score a touchdown. And I think that's what you saw play out on Saturday against this defense and with Oregon's offense. They crossed over the 50 a couple times and found some success moving the ball, but when they needed to make plays down there in the red zone, they couldn't do it. They kicked a field goal there at the end of the first half, cutting a 21-0 lead into 21-3. And there were some Oregon fans in the stands that at that moment were like, well, this isn't good because Georgia scored a touchdown every time and you're kicking a field goal here. And then, you heard Dan Jackson talk about it there in the interview medley. This defense takes pride in, keeping them out of the end zone, even those second string guys, because all those guys that are starters now on this Georgia defense, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Kamari Lassiter, Zion Logue, Chris Smith, those guys, not necessarily Smith, but a lot of those guys, last year against Kentucky, when Kentucky scored late in that game to make it, I think, a 30-14 victory or something along the lines of that. they remember what that was like. And so I think to have that culture instilled from the young players all the way up to the old heads, like a Chris Smith, so to speak, I think that speaks volume about where this defense is and ultimately where it's going to get to be. They're going to face better offenses. Tennessee looks really potent this week. Anthony Richardson did some nice things in an upset win for Florida over Utah. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how all that goes. But I thought from a defensive standpoint, I liked what I saw there in terms of Georgia versus Oregon. And I do think the pass rush and the sacks are going to come when teams, I think, play more conventional style offenses there. I will say on the offensive side of the ball, that's maybe the best game Georgia has played under Kirby Smart. They scored 7 touchdowns to start the game there. Stetson Bennett scored a touchdown or led a touchdown drive on every single drive that he was in. I told Brandon Adams in the press box, this was early on, I don't know how you go about covering Brock Bowers. I really don't. I think if Georgia wanted to force him the ball like they did in the SEC championship game last year, he could, and he could finish with 200 yards receiving in every game. But I think the offense that you saw on Saturday is so deadly because so many different guys can beat you. You have A.D. Mitchell on the outside. You have Kenny McIntosh out of the backfield. Kendall Milton also had a touchdown catch. You have Ladd McConkey, who we touched on at the top of our program tonight. It seemed like Oregon was just like, okay, we're not going to let Darnell beat us. We're not going to let Brock beat us. We're not going to really let A.D. Mitchell or Kenny McIntosh beat us, quote unquote, even though Kenny McIntosh had over 100 yards receiving. They were sort of like, all right, we're just going to leave Ladd McConkey open and hope that our athletes in space can tackle him. And they learned very quickly that their athletes could not do that because Ladd McConkey, for everyone who makes the Bill Belichick future draft pick joke, Ladd McConkey's a really, really good football player. Rushing touchdown yesterday, receiving touchdown there as well. And so when you have that diverse of an offensive skill set, you're going to be able to win in a lot of different ways. And I think this offensive line that we saw yesterday, we saw the starting 5, but Amarius Mims is going to play a lot. And man, he is a giant. We talk about when they bring in Tate Ratledge and they bring in Xavier Truss as your starting guards. Well, they can also bring in Amarius Mims in situations as well. And that seriously upgrades the physicality and just the raw size that you have there on the offensive line. And so having that this year upgraded over last year, again, this offense is special. I think coming out of yesterday, one of the real big national media talking points is how good this Georgia offense is going to be. And, Ohio State had a slugfest game against Notre Dame last night. I think the way that people talked about Ohio State's offense coming into the season is going to be how people talk about this Georgia offense throughout the course of the season. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes there. Let's see. Let's go ahead and answer some questions here. See what you guys have to say. String Gene. Yeah, credit to Florida here. It's a big time win by Billy Napier, holding on there at the end, interception in the end zone, and Anthony Richardson really playing well. But I think one thing that I'm interested about Florida is I didn't think they were going to lose, all 3 of their big games in the month of September, but they get Kentucky this week, a week after a physical Utah team. I know it's at home, but a physical Kentucky team going down there, that's not going to be an easy game for Florida again. And so how do they go about following up that performance from this past Saturday? And then to end the month, you go play Tennessee in Knoxville, a team that is, I think, a total 180 from Kentucky in terms of the way that they're going to want to play and how fast they're going to want to play. And that game being in Knoxville is also going to be a challenge there. But I thought the Billy Napier era started off on a really great foot for him because, their schedule this year is really tough. And you go 6-6, 7-5, maybe even an 8-4 with the wrong combination of losses, it can sometimes be tough to overcome that. And so Billy Napier, I think, started out on the right foot. And I think that helps the Georgia-Florida game and how interesting it might be come the end of the season there. So good observation there, String Gene. Let's see. Questions here. Let's stick with Georgia here. Hold on. Chad Williams, you say running game struggled. They averaged 5.3 yards a carry. I know they didn't have anyone, break off an explosive run, but I thought when they wanted to, they were able to run the ball pretty consistently and get what they wanted to on the ground there. Sure, you would have liked to see those explosive runs more often than you did yesterday, but I thought the passing game was so dynamic that, if you're nitpicking on the running game here and you want to see them all at 200 yards rushing, I mean, they scored touchdowns on the first 7 drives of the game. Stetson Bennett had a touchdown on every drive that he led. I see the concerns there and what you're saying, but you go back and look at the statistics. It was a pretty good game all around from that Georgia offensive line. And really, Georgia only ran the ball 25 times. They threw the ball in that game more than they had run. And I know for years people have been calling to see that, and that's what it's going to look like. You're going to throw for 400 yards and rush for another 125, finish with 471 yards of offense. It's funny, for years people want to see Georgia open up throwing the ball, and then they have a nice running day, but not nice enough for some people. Danny Pope, the unnecessary roughness. I'm assuming this is in regards to Kamari Lassiter. Unfortunately, it is a rule in college football that you are not allowed to lift defenders or opposing offensive players off the ground. It is a player safety conduct rule. It is a rule. I just don't, it's not a good rule. Kamari Lassiter, I thought that was a great tackle. It was not like Alec Ogletree suplexing a Georgia Tech offensive player all those years ago, but it is a rule, and I do probably have to say it was correctly called. But at the same point in time, I understand why some might be upset and think, oh, that's just a football play. It was an incredible play and really show of strength by Kamari Lassiter, a player that I thought played well yesterday in his first career start. And as someone, as this season goes along, talking with Jeff Santel, if we think that Keely Ringo can be better than Darian Kendrick last year, which I think a lot of us believe is going to be the case as the season develops, I also think that Kamari Lassiter is going to end up being better than Keely Ringo was in his first season as a starter. And so I think the secondary, with what you saw yesterday from Chris Smith, Malachi Starks coming out showing right away why he was a 5-star player, Dane Jackson making some nice effort plays there. I think the secondary is going to be better this year than it was a year ago. And while, yes, there are some concerns, especially I think at that inside linebacker position, Shmuel Munden flashed a little bit, but the rest of those guys, they got some big shoes to fill in terms of replacing Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. So, there's still, it's a work in progress there, but I do think that this defense, as we saw yesterday and as we're going to see over the course of the season, I think really makes some nice strides there. Let's keep going here. I'm scrolling. Brandon Howell, you asked, did I find it interesting that Oscar Delp got in before Arik? I don't. I wrote about this a few times last week. We noticed in practice that Oscar was repping ahead of Arik Gilbert. I would point out here, as I did in the video, Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington were the only two tight ends to play in the first half. And if you go back and watch, it's pretty easy to see why. Those guys are so incredibly physical when they are blocking. And that's what Oscar and Arik are going to have to do. They're going to have to bring that same sort of intensity to the blocking game to get on the field, because I think you saw, Darnell with the 25-yard catch and run he had, Brock Bowers getting open, wreaking havoc. Those guys are great with the ball in their hand. But I think what they do that makes this offense so special is how physical they are as perimeter blockers and how they open up holes for those explosive plays. Think back, this is a rather obscure play, but 2018, that long touchdown run DeAndre Swift had. And there's the highlight of Jeremiah Holloman just blocking a Kentucky cornerback, 25, 30 yards downfield. That's what Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington do for this offense. And I think that's a big reason why you saw them play and why those two guys are so important for what Georgia does this season. Let's see. Comments, questions. Tyke Smith did play yesterday. Again, not surprised by the role that he had played. It sounded like he had really only just gotten fully cleared to return to football activities last Monday. And so they're going to bring him along. Javon Bullard got the start at star. William Poole played there as well. They rotated maybe a good bit more at safety in this game than they have in years past. And I think that speaks to, one, they really like what they have in Malachi Starks there. But two, they've got two guys they feel comfortable with at that star position in Bullard and Poole. And I'll be interested to see how Tyke Smith develops here along the course of the season and what he's able to bring there at that position as well. I think they like what they have in cornerback at Kamari Lassiter and Keely Ringo there. And so I think coming out of that first game, I think Georgia should be encouraged by what they have in the secondary there. Randy Sharp, I'm going to be interested this week in terms of the AP poll and the coaches poll as well. Georgia's probably not going to be number one. It's still going to be Alabama, but I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia leapfrogged Ohio State, even with Ohio State having beaten Notre Dame at home on Saturday night there. And so I think going forward, that Georgia win was as impressive as anything we saw this first weekend. And so coming out of that, how do other programs out there match up to that? Now, conversely, Oregon was the highest rated team in the AP preseason poll that Georgia had on its schedule. And so and also if you look at some of the talent composite rankings, Oregon was the most talented team that Georgia was going to play this season. And so how does Georgia challenge itself and stay hungry and continue hunting the catchphrases that we have so often heard them use this offseason already? How do they do that over the course of the season when they know they're so much better than everyone else they play on the schedule? I think this first game, they had a lot to prove. They wanted to show, hey, we know we won it all last year, but this is a team that is still just as hungry and willing to hunt. I'll be interested to see how that keeps up over the course of the season, especially knowing they're going to get everyone's best shot. South Carolina on the road in a couple of weeks, Auburn at home, Florida in Jacksonville, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, home against Tennessee. There's a target on Georgia's back right now, and while they're still out there hunting apex style like the Predator, there's a couple of Arnold Schwarzeneggers, Carl Weathers out there, Jesse Venturas, who are trying to take them down, and so it's ultimately going to be up to Georgia to finish the job in a way the original Predator could not. Let's see. Clarence Dawson. Don Blaylock did play yesterday. I know a lot of people want to, peruse how much guys are playing and whatnot. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint had a really nice catch there on the first drive of the game to convert a big third down there. A.D. Mitchell had the touchdown catch on Stetson Bennett's last drive there. They've just got so many weapons. I think the base personnel, 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, Kenny McIntosh at running back, and then Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell as your 2 wide receivers. That's going to be base personnel for Georgia this year, and they can absolutely live out of that because all 5 of those guys can beat you in a multitude of ways, and they can be very diverse in what they want to do offensively. So it speaks to the overwhelming sort of, and Kirby touched on it, they don't necessarily have great depth at those positions, but the guys that they do have all played significant snaps, and they're going to be able to rotate them in, bring them along. Kearis Jackson had a relatively quiet day yesterday, and he still had some nice moments there. So, I get why some people want to see where guys are playing and how often or whatnot, but Georgia has so many guys that they're going to get involved over the course of the season. Some games yesterday was the Ladd McConkey and Kenny McIntosh game. Going forward, you're probably going to have an A.D. Mitchell and Brock Bowers game. You could have a Dominic Blaylock and Darnell Washington game. You could have a Kendall Milton and Kearis Jackson game. They're going to be able to mix and match and take advantage of what the defense gives them because of so many skill sets that they have. David Wayne Carroll, Chris Smith is fine, just a stinger. Again, Chris Smith is an absolute warrior, one of my favorite guys on this team. Awesome interception yesterday, really fooling Bo Nix, showing that veteran savvy and stepping in front of a pass and making him think that it was open. He's going to be fine. Ultimately, it is not a long-term injury, and he picked up that injury in a pretty violent collision, but you could not coach up a player to break up a pass better than he did. Go in there, make a physical hit, and knock the ball out. So just a stinger from Chris. He's going to be fine. If it were a closer game, he would have come back in there for Georgia. So let's do one more question and head out for the night. We want to keep this short. Obviously, there is a football game there on right now, Florida LSU. Tomorrow night, we have Clemson, Georgia Tech. And then next Saturday, Samford, comes to Sanford Stadium to take on the Georgia Bulldogs in a game where, this will be Georgia's first home game since winning the national championship. And so I'm going to be really interested in seeing what the environment is for Georgia there that day. James Marvel. So Nyland Green was out there. The one thing to note was that he was wearing number 37 when he was in on defense because they want to get Nyland in on special teams. And Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is also wearing the number 1 jersey. So late in that game, Nyland was working as a second string corner opposite Dalen Everett there. He was just wearing number 37, but he did play yesterday, and I think he's a guy that is going to get more reps as the season goes along there, but they really like what they have in Kamari Lassiter and Keely Ringo there. JC, I thought early on, and we'll probably end it here, pass blocking wasn't necessarily great early on. I thought Stetson's legs really helped save some sacks there and turn those into throwaways, which I think was a nice sign of growth there for Stetson Bennett. But, we touched a little bit earlier here tonight on the running game there. I think this offensive line is going to be plenty good. I mean, there were a number of times, especially as that game went on, where Stetson Bennett had plenty of time to throw. You think of that throw to A.D. Mitchell where it seemed like he had forever to find a guy, and ultimately Mitchell gets open there. I don't believe Bennett was sacked at all yesterday. So I think this offensive line, again, they rotated a lot during that game. They were mixing and matching in terms of who was out there. Amarius Mims played a lot of snaps. Devin Willock came in. Both those guys come off the bench. You have Warren Erickson as a valuable rotation piece there as well. They can legitimately go 8 deep on this offensive line right now, and they could very well still be trying to find their best 5 offensive linemen. And so I'm going to be interested in seeing over the course of this season, especially this early stretch where maybe other than South Carolina out of these first 5 games, they don't really have 5, 6, 7 games really, an opponent that is capable of testing them. I think that Auburn front that they're going to see on October 8th is probably the first time that they face a defensive front where you're going to need your offensive line to be at your best. But I thought that Georgia offensive line played really strong yesterday. So that's going to wrap it up for us here tonight. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to try and do this every Sunday night during the regular season. Obviously, we'll have winners and losers. We'll do a little best of from the press conferences, and then we'll answer your questions here for about 15, 20 minutes or so. So my name is Connor Riley. This is Connor in Coverage. You have Brandon Adams tomorrow morning at 9:45 starting on dognation.com before getting over on the other apps around there. Mike Griffith on the beat on Monday night. Wednesday night, Jeff Sentell. So you guys, we have plenty of content coming. Season is here. Georgia is 1-0, a 49-3 win over the Oregon Ducks. Bulldogs take on Samford in Sanford Stadium at 4 p.m. this Saturday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Connor Riley. This has been a Dog Nation production.